Hello everybody, welcome to Farmer Yip's Feldy. I'm actually not on our current save game at the moment. I've been doing some additional modding in the map, and I figured I would use kind of a test save to come in and look at a couple things. And namely, I've started work on making an area to haul timber to. Let me zip down to the wharf. Now, as you'll see, there's actually a lot of barges here. There's several barges before and behind. They're out scattered in the water. There's one beside the wharf here. And what I'm going to do real quick, I have a tractor here. It's paused. I'll show you in a little bit kind of what I had to do in order to get it to pause. But let me see if I can pick up a few scattered logs that I have here just for this purpose and show you kind of what I have in mind. This is obviously totally undone down here. I need to do a bunch more work. But before I did all the prettying up, if you will, oh, that wasn't very good. Let me just... Oh shoot, that's right. I forgot it puts it far away from the tractor. I better put this on, make sure I want to do it to the right. Let me come over here and pick them up. I know I've showed this log trailer in a previous episode. I've done a little bit more work on it too. Frankly, for those of you that also watch the FS13 series that I have, I also made a trailer in there that would auto-load logs, and I almost think this one here is even more stable. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I maybe need to make a bigger trigger. There we go. Alright, so before the barge leaves, I want to come over here and just unload into the barge. Now, there's a number of things a person could do, with a wharf like this, or shipyard, if you will. Sometimes you'll see triggers that are sitting out here or over here rather, with pseudo machinery to put things in there. But I wanted the barge to literally carry the logs. Yeah, it wasn't very pretty unloading them. But you would have no idea the trouble I went through to get the logs to sit there on this barge and just stay there. Here, let me get out. I'm gonna fly just a little bit. Oh joy, what's all that? Yeah, as you can see, I'm still in the process of testing, so I have some errors in the log to deal with. Let me just fly up in the air a little bit here. I stole this barge from someone else's map. I can't even remember it off the top of my head. I'll try to figure that out. But it was only the shell of the barge, if you will, and it was intended to sit in place kind of at the edge of the dock, and you would bring material to it. I think it was designed to hold grain or wood chips or something like that, and I wanted it to hold logs. Well, what I discovered is when you come bring it just straight in as is, any logs you throw out there immediately fall straight through it and go to the bottom of the ocean. So that wasn't going to work, so I had to figure out how to put collisions in it so that, it would sit there, and, as the player, we could also go stand in there. And then there's anyone that's messed about, a little with mapping or remembers, the days of FS09, which was on the Giant's Island. You remember maybe there was a ship that kind of went around and around the island. Well, so I set up a spline in here to haul, there it goes, haul these boats around, And right now, I think I have 40 of them going. And once I finally get it all set up, I'm not going to have any more. I'm going to put maybe 4 in there. But the idea is that they're going to pause at the dock for 5 minutes. And if I just catch up with the barge here, as it follows a leader, when it pauses, every barge pauses. But you can see it is definitely hauling my logs away, and it looks like one of them maybe rolled clear to the back. Yeah, so it isn't falling off or falling through. It's carrying them somewhere, and maybe it doesn't look like a proper representative of a log hauler, but I don't care. It was hard enough to get a barge in here that would do this. Okay, a barge isn't self-propelled. Yeah, and this one here is gonna stop here pretty soon. There we go. There's yeah, it doesn't look perfect, but you know what, it's getting the job done. So I could, if I had more logs, I could put it in here. So obviously with 40 some boats here, it's going to be pausing all the time, which of course we don't want it to do. But I got to thinking, if I want something to haul the logs away, it needs to stay put long enough. Ah, there was a ship horn. It needs to stay put just long enough so I can throw a few logs in there while it's, sitting kind of down here at the dock. And so I was envisioning, I imported this building over here to put here. I envision putting something in here to hold a bunch of logs. Kind of. The physics here are really wonky for the logs, so I really don't know, just how long you could expect them to stay put. So I'll maybe put up a couple things in here that you could drop them off. The thing of it is, probably would be busy hauling them out of the brush down here and leaving them for a spell before sending them off in the boat. Yeah, he wants to leave. So anyway, that's kind of what I had in mind. So in the future, there may be poles down here and logs sitting within the poles if I can get them to stay put until I have a whole mess of them, and then wait for this barge to stay put. Then I can move it into the barge. Now, at the opposite end of the map, way down over there, kitty corner, I have a trigger sitting out in the water, and I've already tested it. I know that it works. Took forever to wait for these slow barges to come. But it's a trigger that when the barge passes through, it is going to sell the logs that are in it. Now, one thing I haven't tested or looked at to make sure of is that it gives me money, but I know I hear the money clink sound, if you will, so I'm pretty sure it's putting money in the bank. So I think this is all I really wanted to show kind of while I was in game here. Otherwise, just kind of while I'm flying here, you can see kind of what I made. It was like a whole separate island, and probably the best way to see it, I guess I can raise up here a little bit. Yeah, there's the logs over there. Right now, it is very unfinished, and you can't, there's nothing in it. Eventually I want to put, some decoration around it, trees, whatever. Right now, I barely have in, there you can see other barges kind of hanging out in the water. I basically put a road in and a bridge kind of over to the mainland. I added a little bit more on the mainland to kind of have a bridge abutment I could put in place. I was thinking maybe of putting a gate there similar to other gates Farmer Yip set up, for achievements or whatever, but I don't know. This is never going to be released anyhow. It's just for my own messing around, so I'll probably just leave it open so people can drive in here. But I kind of envisioned, it's an island that has some amount of size. So I was thinking of maybe putting a field in there somewheres. So we could even do a little bit of farming over here. Probably not much of a bigger field than the one, just dead ahead, the double duck bill field or whatever we call it. So there's lots more I need to do, but before I did the decorating part, which is kind of always the easy and the fun part, if you will, because you can see what you're doing, I wanted to take care of the tough part, which was figuring out the barge and trying to get them, well, first off to move. I mean, I'd never really worked with a ship. Well, I guess I have. The ship script before, maybe an FS-15. I've never worked with it in FS-11. Had a few quirks and then figuring out the barge situation. So I'll tell you what, let me head out of the game at the moment. Like I say, this was just a test map anyhow, while I'm kind of working with this. Let me see what kind of things are plugging up the mod. Yeah, we got a bunch of... Oh, there goes the barge. It waited its 5 minutes. There, perfect timing of the horn. Yeah, I'm even printing to the log when it's moving, when it's pausing. Now they're all moving. So these errors appear to be, they're sounds, and there's something that is attached to the barge. Whether it's the random sound is the horn that you hear. So I wonder if part of the problem is I simply have way too many boats. And maybe once, I get this down to just a couple boats, maybe it won't have the trouble. And yes, I'm fully aware that these aren't self-propelled boats. Barges certainly can't propel themselves. So maybe at some point I'll put a boat behind it as if it's pushing it. I seem to recall there may have been a tugboat mod of some kind. But anyway, for the moment, they are just kind of as they are. We'll just pretend there's a ship. And there it's pausing again. We probably, yep. So for 5 minutes, we could put logs in there. And I think I like it versus having just a trigger to throw them in there and have the logs disappear, when you throw them off the edge. This way, at least, the logs are carried somewhere clear to the far corner of beyond the mountains. Where they will just magically disappear. And it's in an area where we can't see the water. We usually aren't over there looking at the water, so I figured it was a good place, for the logs to be sold. Anyway, give me just a moment. I'll hop out of the game and be back in a second. Alright, here we are in the editor, and I wanted to share just a little bit of setting up a ship spline in case anyone else ever does it. And I made this 100% from scratch, up here through create and then a spline, and it puts the spline somewhere out here, but I know I also had to put it in a transform group. And you gotta have it in a certain order. The spline comes first, the boat comes second, and I made some modifications to the script whereby there's also a trigger. When the boat hits the trigger, that's when the script says, hey, let's pause everything for 5 minutes. And then once the boat starts moving again, it waits until another ship comes along and hits the trigger. So that's kind of what, this one here, and then everything else. This is a trigger. Oh yeah, let me go show you this. Clear on the far side of the map, way off in the corner over here, our beloved Feldy, I put this little trigger here. And it's the same old Bale Destroyer trigger that I had previously modified. When I say modify, I mean with a Lewis script. It's the barn movement trigger that I think sold the hay. So you'll notice that there's this thing down in the water. It's actually a remnant or a bit of the hay elevator. I just jammed it in the water so we don't see it. The trigger for the bale destroyer trigger is right up here. And when we see the spline, that of course passes right through here. So you'll see kind of the route that it takes around the map. It just kind of going in one big old circle. This is a spline point, where you can move it. It's actually totally off the map itself. So the main map area, of course, is whatever you can see here that's visible. But this is just water. This is out in Neverland. We couldn't walk out. Well, we'd be in the water. So anyway, the boats pass through here. This is where the logs are sold. And so you can kind of see the pattern. I don't know. I like seeing these things, so I made the spline come close to land in a number of areas just so we could see our ships and they kind of swerve in. And I don't know, it'd probably be better if the spline was straight between here and here, but whatever. I chose to put a bend in it. And so when you set up the transform, you have the spline, and then there's all these points you can add to it. I guess I'm really not showing that part. There's a number of key bindings or key shortcuts, if you will, where you add points. You can drag them this way and that way. And this would really be how you would set up a road network too. The easy part with the ships is, the water out here is a flat plane. So you don't have to go, worry about going up or down. If you were to put a spline on the roads, as everybody knows in here, like here's a hill, you have to conform the traffic, to the spline rather, to the hill. So, but anyway, that's what I put in. The spline is the first item. Then this here, don't be confused by the name. This is the ship. And let me just hit F and we'll go to it. This is at point 000. I almost think you have to have it there if I'm not mistaken. And oh, by the way, the transform group is also at 000. And it must be in order for this to work. At least that's my understanding. That's kind of what I learned when I did the trains, that are in here too. It must start from 000, and the spline can be moved wherever you need it. As you see, I got some different things here, but the object that is going to move on the spline needs to be at 000. So it puts it right in the middle of the map, clear at the bottom. And of course, it makes a nasty sound now when I load up the game because I have sounds on this thing. All these visible things, and there's audio of, let me see, can I play it? Oh, that's birds. But there's, I don't know if I can just play the one. Yeah, here's now the sound that you hear when you're loading the game. Very obnoxious. But anyway. This is, like if we looked up here, see the map is up here. This is what I mean. It's kind of at 000 in the middle. And so the thing that I learned is, if you are moving an object around a spline that has no collisions, and when I say collisions, meaning, you could stand on it and you would fall straight through, there's it wouldn't bump into anything. You could literally drag it all over the land. It would go through buildings and hills and everything because it has no collisions. Well, then you don't need to worry about it at all. You just show whatever's going to be dragged around, and that will be that. If you wanted to hold something, then that's another matter, and you have to make sure that like here, call base. There's several pieces here. Call base is actually the piece that's in the bottom, and it has collisions. It's a rigid body, and it's going to be kinematic. Kinematic because it needs to follow a spline. I know I've explained that in a previous video. Dynamic means it could go anywhere it wanted. Static means it would stay put. These are selections that we have. And kinematic means it moves when something else provides impulse to it. In this case here, the ship Lewis script, is going to move it around a spline. So, but anyway, if you wanted to have collisions, you have to tell it, rigid body, collision mask. I almost think I saw this scheme on another one. This is the same collisions as on the terrain. I wanted to make sure that anything thrown into it, even if it was your tractor, would not go through. And it's interesting, now that I have figured out how to pause it, you really could design a map and, you could use a ferry, say, to access other parts of the map. But I think for here, I'm not going to build that into this. I mainly just wanted it to haul logs. So then you need collisions kind of on the end, and these you can't see. Here, I'll show it. There it is. There's one. Then one on the other end, of course. And these here, again, all have a collision mask, same as a terrain. And then we also got the sides. If I pull these off, I'll show just one and make it visible. Of course, I don't want to have visibility on in the game. It would look hideous. But these are the collisions that have the collision mask to make sure that the logs are all held in here. Everything else is porous. I mean, you could stand on this, or if you dropped a log on the end here for on accident, it's going to go into the ocean. It'll pass straight through. So anyway, put all those on here. Then the rest of this is kind of what I pulled out of another mod map, this Lictor, whatever that transforms as. And I ended up putting some sound on it. I forget. Oh, and some lights. That part I haven't tested. When it's dark, there should be spotlights on either end. You don't even see it. I mean, and I figured nobody's going to notice. In the dark, if you see it, there should be little lights that you can see, but nobody will know that it doesn't have it in reality. And also the sounds. So, and those, by the way, also has a script. The night light script. It's no different than, what's on the lighthouse or what's on the houses. It's going to look for whatever comes here later, and it's a simple toggle. When it's nighttime, they're going to be on, and when it's daytime, they're going to be off. Very simple. These other sounds also are, well, one of them is anyway, subject to, see, this is the boat sound, so that's going to be kind of just a dull hum. As long as it's moving or on, which is all the time, it's going to just go. But this other one is the boat horn, and so it's kind of put on a random noise, if you will, including playing at night if it's out there roaming around, which it will be. So I just use the settings that are here out of the Farm Sim 09 map. I just use the exact same settings so that it blows the horn periodically. The question is whether we'll even hear it from the shore. And I suppose the only time we will hear it is, kind of when the barge is at the dock and we happen to be down there working on it. Otherwise, we may not even hear it. The collisions, this was really interesting. And this is where you have to be practically insane to work in modding, because, there's so much you just don't know. For me, my weakness, if you will, is 3D objects and Blender and some of those kind of things. So I was thrilled to find a map, that had a barge, and then was immediately devastated when I couldn't hold anything in it. So I scoured the internet for other Farm Sim 11 objects, that looked like a barge, and folks, they just aren't out there. You can find them for Farm Sim 13, 15, 17, but it's always ticklish to take those backwards into a previous version. You can do it, but a lot of times what you have to do is take them to Blender or some kind of 3D model software, which is exactly what I ultimately had to do. I just couldn't find another one to use, so I buckled up and said, okay, I gotta make my own. Now I don't have to make the whole thing. The thing that I made was the collisions. I can handle that. That's ugly blocks, but it'll get the job done and hold all the logs in there. Now, to do that, I grabbed a trigger, just a simple trigger that looks similar to, let me see, I gotta get it back here. I guess it'd be this one right here. Similar to this here. It's just a simple rectangular shaped item. So I used it, and you can see the scale over here, and I made it so that it would fit on this thing down here. I made one for all the sides, made one for the ends, made one for the bottom. And then I thought, well, I'll just set up the collisions, no problem, and it'll work. Well, it didn't work. One of the errors that was popping is it said a kinematic object must be scale 111. And of course, I had to have different scales on it in order to fit that simple trigger, if you will, that I brought over here. And by the way, even though it started as a trigger, I of course called it something else, and I took all the trigger attributes off. I mean, that's kind of what I did. I'm just robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say, and using it for another purpose. So I tried and tried to bring it into FarmSim 13's Giants editor, where I could, freeze. The Giants editor, in starting with FarmSim 13, had something in edit that we don't have in 11, and it's called freeze transformations or something like that. And what it allows you to do is to take an object that you have scaled, and you can rescale it at 111. But we just don't have the ability to do that here in FarmSim 11. So I tried it in 13. I tried to import it over to 11. It failed miserably. So finally, I scaled it to, I took it out of the i3D editor. I saved it, so you can save things as an object. Let me see if I can go with that. Save as, you can save this whole thing as a wavefront object. Now, I don't know what that is. All I know is a Blender opens it. So that's what I did with these specific collision pieces. I exported them into another file, and then I further exported them as a wavefront object. And then, I know this is an old version of Blender. I don't even know what version it is, 2.76. I fired it up. You have to import your object first, and so I went to grab it. Remember, it was a wavefront object. So it brings it all in, and the first thing it does, for some oddball reason, is it scales everything 100 times larger. Well, I don't know if it just does that on purpose, but it did in here, 100 times larger than it needed to be. So I had to rescale it. Then you have to set it at a scale of 111, because I don't want to export it to an i3D file, when it isn't at proper scale, and then have trouble again, in FarmSim 11 trying to bring it in, it still doesn't work. So here's all the collisions. I mean, it's just a simple box. This isn't even, it isn't even touching each other on the ends. I mean, that's kind of how I just threw it together, but you know what? It'll hold logs, and it'll keep them in there. So I had to refigure out a few things here in good old Blender, including, because I must not have used it for a while. In order to export it, there's a Giants i3D. This is a special plugin, and I had a dickens of a time trying to figure out even how to get that in there. So yeah, I just don't do enough in Blender. I'd really like to learn it someday and do more with it. But you know, there's lots of helpful tutorials on YouTube, and anytime I was trying to figure out how to do something, I would Google it, you know, and it would give instructions, which is helpful for a simple little one-off project like this. Suffice it to say, I got the job done, I got it in here, and now we have a working barge. And that is really that. I got a few logs here for testing purposes, and like I say, before I do anything in game actually using it, I have a bunch of, well, not a bunch, it won't take long to smooth this off, turn part of it into a field, add some decoration or whatever. I'm not sure what I'm going to do down here. You know, I've long wanted someday maybe to make my own map or something, and I just don't know that I have the creativity for it. You know, and part of it is I'm an accountant, so I don't have artistic flair. You know, this is just a simple dock. I robbed all the parts from someone else's map. So obviously, if this was going to be released, there goes a bell. If this was going to be released, you know, I'd need to remember who I borrowed it from to give proper credit. But I don't know if this even looks like a functioning dock. You know, it's just so simple. And I mean, it'll work for our purposes, but I probably should have a crane or something in here. Anyway, I just don't know if I would ever be cut out to be a mapper. You know, I think I do okay tinkering with someone else's map, making additions, kind of like we're doing here with this, to Farmer Yip's map. But in terms of making my own, you know, all I know is I just get more and more respect for those who do this kind of thing when I attempt to do just a little bit in it. And you know, in a previous video, someone stopped by and commented also on Farmer Yip is to, you know, back in the day, he also put out a bunch of mapping tutorials. He showed and shared a lot of information that he had learned, you know, that he shared with others to help those of us learning to mod to know what to do. And like me, this other person had learned a lot from Farmer Yip back in the day, you know, as to how to do some of this. So I'm still learning. There's probably no end to learning. But anyway, we are past the 30-minute mark, so I think I'll cut the video here. This is kind of what I'm working on for Feldy. Hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.